Welcome everybody to Comics People Making the Comic. This is Nick Forker. We're going to talk about step number 2, which is thumbnails. Each one of these rectangles is a page. And so in this way, you take your ideas, you kind of parse them, you distill them into the visual language that is comics. So what are thumbnails? Thumbnails are a way of drawing. This is a way you can break down your ideas so that your story looks visually interesting. I actually think thumbnailing is the most important part of the process because you're really spending a little time to do the most work. Meaning you're gonna pencil how you're gonna pencil, you're gonna ink how you ink. That takes forever. Thumbnails are the part in the story making process where anything is possible. All right, if you know me, you know that I do Comics People. You're watching it now, welcome, you are one. Also, just a couple things, we have our Patreon. So if you wanna support, if you like this channel, you know, we pass right by the homeless people and go, oh, he's just gonna buy drugs with that money. If only he did something I could get behind. And then we pass by the artists and go, they'll figure it out. But we need people just like you to help us keep doing what we're doing. So patreon.com/comicspeople. Also, the books that I make support the channel. So forkerbooks.bigcartel.com. And finally, nickforker.com. I'm just going to leave this up here for you because I know you'll do the right thing. All right, so when I'm making comics, the thumbnail process is the process by which I break down my script or plot or idea into the visual language. Now, thumbnails are really important because you're going to use mostly stick figures and shapes. You're going to get basic forms. This is where you get all your pacing, action, suspense. This is where you figure out the transitions. And inside your panels, you figure out where everything goes. You get to use foreground, middle ground, background, small, medium, large. You plan out what all your scene transitions will look like. Now, a lot of times people say like, this is the storyboarding process or whatever, but this is not movies, this is comics. So whereas like some of that language is helpful to get you to understand what you're doing, don't limit yourself to what movies do. You can do way more than movies because it's just you. You don't have a budget. You don't have 4,000 people working on it. You just have you. But make sure to leave space for word balloons in those panels as you break down what goes where. Now, sometimes your script comes fully formed, meaning you just work on it from start to finish. Sometimes you do a drawing and this drawing is the kind of keystone or the seed that kind of grows into what your episode or issue will be about. And that was the case here. I had this one drawing and I just knew it was a smiley face character wearing a suit asking, how did it go? And Island replies, well, how did what go? And he's like, your life, right? At this stage, I'm just drawing out this idea of kind of stream of consciousness. I'm not fussing or fighting too much with the way I'm drawing it. I'm just putting down some basic things, figuring out some flow. And, you know, if this stuff looks good, it's only because I've done 20 books by now, right? This is stuff you internalize. And so I figured out the first few shots here, and I knew that I would get to this shot where it was like the curtains part and there was this big 2-page spread. Okay, so this idea came to me and I did a few more drawings after that, but it kind of petered off. I didn't have much after that, right? That's about it. And the idea came to me and then I do this thing where I get into the storyboarding of it. So this storyboard right here is just a reimagining of the first few pages in this sketchbook. I had to lay it out in a way that I thought made a little more sense and kind of combined. I'm not gonna do one image per page, right? Even though this is many. I kind of combine some of these so that I'm not just doing one giant image every time. I wanna combine them so they create some panels. And I had to redraw these a couple times. You see 1 and 2 here. 3 and 4, I just wrote spread because I'd already done the heavy lifting of the thumbnail in the sketchbook. I knew that I was gonna do this, so I didn't have to redraw this again. This is enough. Now, when you're drawing, like people say that I draw thumbnails really tight, and that's because I kind of write in the thumbnail process. I write out my book by taking my seed idea for a walk. I kind of take it where it's going to go. I let it lead me, and then I start to lay out the walkway in front of it, so to speak. And so because I draw so intensely in this part of the process, this is where I do a lot of my working out of the ideas. But sometimes you get an idea like this one, and it's kind of samey. It's like, here's a guy, here's a guy, here's a guy, and they're all on the same side of the frame. I knew this wouldn't work, so sometimes you just have to redraw it, and that's what I did here. Once you write it out and you know what's going to happen, then you can redraw the thumbnails so they're a little more exciting and the page flow is better. They call that, creating an eye path, where you have the diagonals that not only create action within the panel, but that also lead the eye to the next panel. And that's really important. That's the invisible art of visual storytelling that people only mention, but maybe don't mention specifically. Also, it's always good to look over a character's shoulder at another character than to have two characters just kind of side by side. And even though I'm achieving that effect here, I didn't feel it was clear enough, so I went over the shoulder to see the eyeball. So think of it this way. You have character 1 here, character 2 here, they're talking, da, 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 da. Well, what if you turn the camera so all of a sudden now you're sitting over character 1's shoulder as they talk, ba, 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 to this character off in the distance? It already creates a cinematic feel. It is just more visually exciting. So instead of, the first thing you can learn about storytelling visually and apply this to your thumbnails is, instead of having two characters side by side kind of flat in the panel, just rotate them so we're looking over one character's shoulder at the other character. And this creates a nice tension because it's like one character has dialogue tossing the ball to the other character. We get to see what they look like when they catch it or their reaction. Okay, so I think when you're first starting off with your thumbnails, one of the things that gave me probably the biggest shot in the arm and helped me level up as quickly as possible was Wally Wood's 22 panels that always work. Famously compiled by Larry Hama and Paul Kirshner. Larry apparently smuggled some of those panels out of Wally Wood's studio when Larry and Paul were working as Wally's assistants. And because of that effort, we are able to have the benefit of that image. And you can Google it, Wally Wood's 22 panels that always work. I'll put it up in the video. Okay, back to the thumbnails. So sometimes your idea will come and you will be laying them out on the page. And sometimes your idea will come in a sketchbook like so. Now, I tell my students, if the idea is just gonna jump into the boat, you don't say, wait, hold on, I gotta go get my fishing pole. You just accept the idea as it comes, and then you start to break it down as thumbnails. Now remember, how your ideas come to you, it's gonna be unique to you in a lot of ways. So instead of fighting it and saying like, no, I have to do it in this way, remember, be curious about your process because chances are it's already happening. If you fill sketchbooks up with drawings, then that's the work. That's the work you're making. Publish that work. Don't think, oh, if I could only make these drawings into a comic book. Not necessary. Take the work you're already making, publish it, scan it, lay it out, print it, fold it, staple it, and get it out into the world because that's the work that you need to make. That's the work that you are making. Why are you fighting the tide of the river? Just let it flow. But then once you publish a few books and you want to start to hammer your ideas into a more narrative structure, you can. And I think that's where thumbnails come in handy. Okay, so this thumbnail becomes this page of comics. This is many stages in after I've penciled and inked. I've laid on some embellishments and I've really added a lot of texture and tone, right? This is the end step. But if I showed just the pencils, they might not show up on screen. The black ink really shows up. But look at how close I got to the finished thing, right? I knew what I was doing, and then I added these images and the panels in the layout that I already had ready. Okay, so now what about when you want to try a different method? So one of my friends was telling me, he was like, you pencil so tight, you can just print out those thumbnails. Now, this is something that you'll be able to do at some point. You can do it now. Find thumbnails that look super tight like this, where you already have most of the heavy lifting done and all the drawing is pretty good. And then what you can do is scan that at a very high resolution, and then you can print out right onto 11 by 17 boards, the images in pencil, and you can see them faintly there behind here, and then ink over top of that. And that's what I've done here. I just inked on top of the images that already existed in my thumbnails. And if we see, very close to the original because the work was already done. Again, be curious about how the work is coming to you and don't fight it. Don't make it more difficult than it needs to be. Sometimes you can just scan your thumbnails and put them right into the computer and print them out big. By the time I had gotten to these thumbnails, I'm thumbnailing pages 13 and 14 here, I had kind of warmed up, so they started to crystallize. Not every page that I do is that tight. Sometimes I'm working out my ideas very rudimentary, like stick figures, figuring out what will happen where and how it will tell the story. Okay, so this 4-panel page of thumbnail boxes here, this is what I use to do my thumbnailing. Now you notice each thumbnail is about the size of a index card. And why is that? Because when you do it at the size of an index card, you're not doing a lot of work, meaning if you scratch in some stuff and you hate it, you can throw it out. But if you work at original size, if you work at 11 by 17 and you draw a whole page and then you hate it and crumple it up, you could have wasted a full day's work. Also, I find that when you work small, you're able to do bigger gestures, meaning like I can make one line that would cross an entire page. Here, it's only 3 inches long, but on a big page, it would be, 11 inches long, harder to make that smooth gesture and such a broad stroke, right? I can scan this and put it in. All right, so let's say we have any story and we want to thumbnail it. Well, what does that look like? Well, we want our visuals to be intriguing and exciting, but we want to tell a story. So the first thing we do when we're telling stories is give clues, right? Page 1, panel 1, what's happening? Well, it's like once upon a time there was a blank, in this case an eyeball. I want to put this character into this visual in a way that is intriguing, right? And I don't know what that means, but usually it means not the center. Unless you're a pro, center is pretty boring. You can use it to effect, but for now you want to think about proportions. You want to think about small, medium, large. You want to think about foreground, middle ground, background. So something up close in the foreground that maybe you can shade over the whole thing. Maybe not, depending on what your story needs. Something in the midground, maybe some sidewalk, some street, the other side of the street, some buildings perhaps. And then something in the background. So we have foreground, we have island here, thumbs up, maybe they're hitching for a ride. And then something in the background, maybe the skyline. Whenever I'm composing my panels, I'm thinking foreground, middle ground, background, and they should each have a different tone. So if island in the front here is going to be the tone of mostly black or the darkest tone, then I have 2 other tones I can use. I can use a gray or I can use a white. And I want those each to be different so that they contrast one another. If I'm gonna do gray in the background here, then I would do white in the midground. But if I'm gonna put details in here and lots of them, this will start to read like a gray after it gets all its bricks and windows, after it gets its passersby, its bike racks, its street signs, right? Its traffic lights, its garbage bags. Once it gets all these details, then it starts to look different. And so maybe I'll leave that skyline white as I add in all the details, which will add up to a gray. And this is where I plan this out. I say, okay, does my character fit in the frame? Is it interesting to look at? Have I made something large, something medium, something small? And this is precisely the process by which we create a comic. But this is a story, and Island's gonna go for a walk. Maybe they're walking down the street. I started them on the right side here, so maybe I should keep that flow of action. Now, I can have them walking, camera left, and so maybe that's what I want to do. I don't know what my script calls for. I'm kind of making this up on the spot. But I can create some motion, and again, I can create some background, right? And maybe, just maybe, they spy something ahead of themselves on the street. So I make this character POV, kind of over the top of the character. I alert the viewer in this previous panel something's going to happen. And maybe they just see like some dog poop on the sidewalk. And you can give them like some emanada to alert, you know, this is absolutely what you want to be doing in the thumbnails phase, is planning out, do I have enough space for everything I want to do? And then if this is just a one-page gag, maybe the poop grows really big and chumps. Makes a lunge for them. Unexpected, a little sight gag, right? I don't know. So then we look at it and we say, like, is this really what, you know, are we pleased with what's happening here? Does it do all the storytelling we want? In this case, I kept my character on the right side of the panel. So we have this diagonal thing here happening. That's pretty nice. We have foreground, middle ground, and background in most of the panels. And then we have just like a sight gag in the last panel. And if this was a one-page comic, I think that would work. Maybe we can make this different, you know, the poop kind of different to make it more exciting. But the whole of what we've done here in just a few minutes is exactly what we want to do for our comics. We want to kind of write it out on the page, block it out, see where everything will go, and then see if we like it. And if not, you just move it into the next panel, and maybe this panel's a little boring. Maybe this one is. Maybe a side-by-side makes more sense for panel 3. And this, we get a little more relative perspective with this profile. And we get a little more space for the path of the eye. And then in the last panel, we come up with something more exciting, whereby maybe this thing springs into being, and we can create something that takes up the whole panel and looks more like our characters in danger by raising their arm or pinching their nose, etc. Okay, this is exactly the kind of stuff you work out in the thumbnail process. Once you have the thumbnails that you like, depending on how tight they are, you can scan them, you can print them, and you can use them to make bigger pages. Now, the thing is, like, there's always going to be room for error. You will think of ideas after you've done your thumbnails. You will want to change some of the things, and that's where you can thumbnail again. That's the beauty of it. So, for instance, here, like, this is a similar situation where I thought this was like pretty boring. Both of these were like pretty boring. So I went ahead and fixed it. And you know, that process looks kind of like this. It's like, I didn't like the placement of these characters. I wanted the dialogue to be a little different, right? So I leave little notes to myself. And that comes out looking a little something like, this. I knew that I wanted to have this character kind of drop in, but I didn't know exactly how I wanted to do it. So I changed the panel borders around a little bit. Instead of doing the eye here and then the silhouette, I went with silhouette and then the eye. And it just becomes a thing. It's a living, breathing thing. Once you see it, then you can make changes. Remember, everything you do is helping you find the next thing you want to do. So I look at it like finding lines. Finding lines help you find the next line. Right here, this changed. I wanted to put some group shots in. And so when I did the group shots, even that I needed to thumbnail out because I wasn't sure how that was going to go. And so some of these group shots became their own thumbnail. So this thumbnail became this group shot. And this is how it goes. So the thumbnail process I find to be one of the more important processes in making comics. Some people don't thumbnail. I think you should. I'm a proponent of the thumbnail. I think you're going to see mistakes. It's easier to see when they're smaller. It's also easier to make really bold and exciting panel choices. You know, again, with this one right here, for instance, I kept most of that, stuff there. And it ended up becoming one of my favorite pages because I kept most of it, but a lot of it changed. Like, I noticed that I had the same kind of character everywhere. So I went ahead and flipped them to the other side to create this nice, interesting kind of like panelist. So we go from really detailed and rendered to basic and with no panel border. We come down here because this whole thing points to this guy, which then read his text and then come this way. And then it points us down to the character. And this brings us into the next panel. So think of each of your page as each page as a kind of chutes and ladders. You want to shoot your character, give it like the visual clues, give everyone the visual clues you need to move around your page in a way where it's like a little map and they don't even know that they're doing it, but they're following this little map that you've laid out for them. And so when you get into pages and panels that are more complicated like this, you've planned this out so that they'll move down in the way that you want them to. And sometimes even with like a little panel break will help them do that. So I couldn't have done any of that stuff without our great thumbnails here. And I don't think those thumbnails happen all at once. Sometimes they take many, many tries. And like you can see here, I've pasted in paper on top to replace panels. I've reworked pages that were previous, and I've taken little bits and pieces from many panels. Like that's what these little numbers are about. I'm like figuring out, okay, it's like a cut and paste process where I'm like figuring out which parts of which thing will actually be on the page. And so it's like a reordering and combining these pages into one thing. I probably had more things to say about thumbnailing. It doesn't interest me in being right. This is not didactic. This is me talking about my experiences. Feel free to use the stuff that is useful to you and to disregard the rest. Everyone works differently, so just work in the way that it comes to you. Take it as it comes and be curious about your process. Be aware how the ideas are coming to you, and then just try to organize them in a way that suits your flow, suits your workflow, and suits your process. For me, that looks like bits of stories that come, then bits of thumbnailing comes. I try to get as much of that done as I can, and then I move ahead with pencils. But again, even some of these pages are still in the pencils stage, right? I haven't even finished these yet. And that's okay. It doesn't have to happen all at once. You can do a gradual progression of pages, some that will finish earlier than others. As long as you have that Bible of your thumbnails and you number your pages in the corners here, it will help you keep, these numbers will help you keep everything straight. So that's about it. If you like what we do, feel free to hop over to Patreon. You'll get to see issues ahead of time. We will mail you comics at some point. We will give you access to behind the scenes in a more personal way. Check out my books, forkerbooks.bigcartel.com. My name is Nick Forker. This has been Comics People, episode 52. I cannot believe it. See you out on the tables.